And I want you to take just a moment now just to release any tension, just to scan your body for a second. And if you feel tension in your shoulders or your jaw or your neck or anywhere else, just release it. Just let it go. Know that you are where you're supposed to be. Everything is well in this moment, and you are at peace. And if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. Let us affirm that the presence and power of God guides me in all my affairs. Centered in God, I know that all is well and all things are working for good. For there is only one presence and one power. I choose to live my life aware of this truth regardless of the circumstances. There is no such thing as separate life. I am not deceived by appearances. I remain centered in God, aware that all circumstances come and go. I live in gratitude with an open heart that welcomes the allness of God. What is the point of meditation? The point of mindfulness? The point of the awareness of this presence? To return to our true home, to see into our own nature is the aim of practice. We see into our own nature by bringing light to each act of our existence, living in a way that mindfulness is present all of the time. When walking past the cypress tree in the courtyard, in our inner garden, we really see it. If we do not see the cypress in our own garden, how can we expect to see into our own true nature? A Zen master who had attained awakening is someone whose eyes are open to living reality. He, she, they, as someone, after being lost in the world of concepts, has returned home to see the cypress in the courtyard of her or their true nature. Hence, they cannot allow their disciple to continue to wander the world of concepts and waste their life, their own awakening. This is why the master feels compassion every time their disciple asks a question about some Buddhist principle, such as Dharmakaya. Rather than have them focus on the concept, you can just put the world into a living reality and focus on the practice. Look at the cypress in the courtyard. Look at the cypress in the courtyard that is your own garden. So I invite you now to enter that garden of Eden that we have within us, to be aware, to experience that goodness, that oneness, that true home, that true nature that is ours. And just take a moment to experience that oneness, that goodness now. As we affirm, centered in God, I know that all is well and all things are working for good. All is well and all things are working for good. Step into that awareness. Step into the garden as we enter the stillness. Enter the stillness. Give yourself a few more moments here. Awareness of that oneness, centered in that goodness, centered in God. I know that all is well and all things are working for good. Affirm your good. Affirm your wholeness, your worthiness. Know that that divine presence moves and lives and has being in you. Take that awareness out into your day today, throughout the rest of your week, knowing you can return here at any time. You can return to your own inner garden, that Garden of Eden, anytime. Gently now, just bring your awareness back to your body. You might decide to move fingers and toes, gently roll your shoulders or roll your neck. Maybe stretch your body a little bit as you bring your awareness back to this space. No rush. And only when you're ready, you can open your eyes and return here to the here and now. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to those who are joining us on Facebook. To my own husband, who couldn't be here today. He is watching a cat who had a little bit of an accident this morning, ran into my leg pretty roughly, and we're monitoring the cat to make sure there's no injury. So thank you. My name is Melissa, and I will be guiding you through this first unity principle as part of this new 5-part, 5-week series. Now, we have our unity principles located here on our wall, and I would imagine some of you have taken time to look at them thinking, I agree with that, but maybe haven't explored them more deeply. For those who are new to our congregation, new as members, this is to help guide you in explaining what these are, how to live these, what these mean to your life. For those who have been with us for a while, it's a refresher course because we know we are always practicing, right? We're always practicing. Now, at its most basic level, the first principle can be expressed as God is all, or simply God is. God is. But we see a more complex, a more nuanced expression here on this wall. There is only one power, one presence, active as the universe, and in my life, God the good. Now, there are two parts to this more nuanced idea of what God is when we say God is all. First, there is one power. We see it as one, an infinite source that is everywhere present. It's unlimited, and we call this presence, this power, God. The second part of this statement is that we see this presence, this power, as good. And I was reminded of this myself this morning by somebody who loves me very deeply here in this congregation, as I was worried about my cat. So the next question I guess we can ask is, how does this show up in our lives? How can we think about this power, this presence for ourselves? Now, I don't know about you, but I know the God of my childhood, the God that I grew up with, is different than the God I experience here in Unity. The God in Unity tradition is different from that God. It's not a jealous God. It's not an angry God. It's not a judgmental God. It's not a God of hellfire and damnation. That isn't that good presence. Now, we can call it a lot of names, whatever name we have for God, the absolute, infinite beingness, creator, Lord, whatever your name for it. There was a lot we heard in the musical song, One Power, this morning. But we know that it is beyond those names. Now, I'll be referencing some of the metaphysical terms as they're defined in the Revealing Word. This is a nice unity handbook for those who might want to explore these terms more deeply. But the word God doesn't just mean the Almighty One or the Creator, the ruler of the universe, the infinite, the eternal. God in unity isn't a person, it's a principle. It is not just the things, the substance behind the things, right? It is the space in between the things. It is the no things. It is the law, the truth behind and underneath and connecting all the things and the no things. That's really hard to fathom, isn't it? And that's where we have trouble sometimes. Now, when you see that word oneness, you're like, yes, one power, one presence. For those who grew up in a Judeo-Christian background, this resonates with a lot of people, that monotheistic sentiment of there is one God, one power. And we can see that sentiment expressed even going back thousands of years into the Hebrew Scriptures, into the book of Genesis. Now, whether you read the Bible literally or don't read the Bible at all, or you look at it like we do here in Unity with a more metaphorical, a more metaphysical, which metaphysical just means beyond the physical. We're looking at how it relates to our life, to our consciousness, to our higher consciousness, how it applies to us. The book of Genesis, especially those first two creation stories, they provide some insight for us. It's about the oneness, the goodness of creation, of the divine, of our relationship to the divine. Now, the first creation story, and there are two, if you read Genesis carefully, the first one spans the first book of Genesis, or the first chapter, chapter 1, and part of chapter 2. And it recounts that creation is good. You'll see the word good used 7 times in this story. I'm not going to say the entire story for you here today. You're more than welcome to go home and open up that Bible or go online and look it up and read it for yourself. But those who understand a deeper metaphysical symbolic meaning of that number 7 know that that represents completion, wholeness, perfection. God is good. It's saying it is complete. It is good. And it's not just good. The people who wrote the Bible, they were inspired by their relationship with the God of their knowing. They wrote and they saw a universe in which God saw everything he had made, and indeed it was very good. So even thousands of years ago, there were people like us who conceived of a God of goodness, of oneness. So we might come into problems here once we get to that good and say, my life isn't like that. My life isn't all good. So what's going on there? Sometimes bad things happen. That's where we run into problems, seeing the whole thing, seeing the goodness. You can ask, how could the creation, this material realm, if it's created out of this living substance, if it's created out of this infinite source, how could it be anything other than good? So we like to label things. I don't want that. That's bad. I don't want that in my life. I can't have that. That causes me pain. That causes me suffering. I don't want that. So think about this. In a human expression where bad things do happen, it can be difficult for some of us. It's difficult for me sometimes to think about this experience, this human experience where stuff happens I don't want to happen. And yet there's a spiritual truth that says God is oneness and goodness and everywhere and in everything and in every situation. how do I bring those into alignment? How do I bring those into agreement? So it's difficult for me to sit here and say there is and has been oneness and goodness in all of my human experience. There is and has been goodness and oneness in all of my human experience, even if I'm not aware of it. Even if I'm not aware of it. So, the more time I spend in my spiritual practice, the more time I spend in meditation, contemplation, prayer, the more I realize the truth of this first principle, the truth of the oneness, the truth of the goodness, the truth of that presence in my life, I become more aware of it. My own experience with God, with that presence, tells me it's true, even if I'm not aware of it at every single moment in my life. I'll give you a couple of examples. Every time I sit down to meditate or contemplate or pray, we were just doing that a few moments ago, right? I feel that connection. I feel that oneness, that goodness, that presence. I don't know if you feel the same when you go into that place, but I know it's true. Every time I look around me and see that light of that presence, that power of that presence, the awe and wonder in other people and in nature and in the world around me, when I'm just struck and I don't even have words to explain the emotion I feel, the connection I feel that goes beyond the physical, the interconnection I feel to others, that's when I know this principle is true. Now, when we truly know the truth behind this principle, when we know that oneness, that goodness at the center of our being, at the core of who we are, we understand that these symbolic ideas like heaven, like kingdom of God, like the Garden of Eden, all these places that represent goodness in the biblical tradition, they can happen here and now. It's possible to have the Garden of Eden here in our own lifetime. So I want to take just a moment to explore the second creation story in Genesis. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because I have a feeling that somebody named Bill will be speaking maybe a little bit about this next week. But I want to talk about how this story has been misused over the years. Misused to make us feel like we are inherently sinful, inherently evil, unworthy of God's presence. And that's not how I read the story anymore. So I'm going to share this little tidbit of wisdom with you that's come out of my own meditation and my own biblical study over the last 2 weeks. The Garden of Eden comes to metaphysically represent our connection, our oneness, the goodness of the divine. It's a place of oneness, it's a place of goodness that where we rest in the divine and where we can see the divine in all things. We see the goodness, we see the oneness. And it's a place that we can return to at any moment. It's a choice. It's a choice. It wasn't a one-time thing to be literally understood way back when that we can never return to. It is a choice for us. And you might say, well, the Garden of Eden wasn't the end of the story. And it wasn't. We also have a choice to decide to eat, partake of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What does that represent? What is that choice? Metaphysically, that tree represents the illusions of separation, the illusions of dualism. And so you have a choice. You can remain in the garden. You can be content in the oneness and the power and the presence, the goodness of God, or you can choose to try to separate yourself from that. It's an illusion, by the way. So the only limits that come in terms of limiting our power, and that power and presence here on earth, are ones that we impose on ourselves. It's only when we see life, see God's creation, see all of this as good and evil, as ourselves somehow being separate from God, apart from God, when we start to define and label and place and separate things out and see things as not one, that we limit that power and presence within us. Now, we can't limit it. It's in everything. It's more vast than we are. But we can limit how it shows up in us. So, these limitations, they're not spiritual truth. These illusions of separation, of dualism, they're not spiritual truth. So the more I understand this, the more I understand that if bad things happen, some of it's likely on me, right? Reverend Ellen Debenport put it this way, quote, "We struggle with words adequate to reflect our experience of the divine, and we haven't even begun to realign religious language with the discoveries of science. We will never understand the totality of the divine, but it permeates our lives nonetheless." This is where we have the hang-up. We struggle to see it all. We struggle to conceive of its fullness, of its vastness, of its goodness. We want to define and separate and label, and therefore we limit. She goes on to say, as all that is, the energy that we call God cannot have any boundaries. An eternal life force cannot be an entity or supreme being with opinions and judgments. It's unlimited. It's inexhaustible. It's not angry. It's not jealous. It's not judgmental. It is the law that underlies all things. It is the principle that underlies all things. She goes on to say, God simply is the source of all energy. Basically, God is all. I'd invite you, if you want to explore this idea and the next few principles with us, to our Wednesday evening book study. This will take place the place of or after the talk. And we're going to ask questions. We're going to share some experiences. There will be some time for contemplation and meditation. And more importantly, we're going to be growing together. I leave you with this prayer, which is a variation of Charles Fillmore's invocation. I am one with infinite beingness. My spirit is filled with the divine aspects of life, love, and wisdom. I acknowledge my oneness with all that is and step forth in this power. Walking step in step with divine wisdom, I am aware of my infinite potential. I draw love from the divine wellspring within as I manifest my highest good according to the truth I know. And so it is. Amen. Namaste.
Thank you, Melissa. So good. Lots of good. It's time for us to celebrate birthdays in May. This is the first Sunday in May, so we always celebrate the birthdays. So, may I have the envelope, please? Okay. And the honorees are Bill Warner. May the 4th be with you. Donald Tuning. And Ann Anderson. By the way, Donald's birthday is the 15th, and Ann Anderson's is the 14th. And Terry Hawks has a birthday this month. Terry Hawks. Terry's birthday is the 20th, and Karen Holdaway, Ron's wife, her birthday is May 26th. Congratulations to all those. And before I forget it, I always forget, I want to ask if there's any others that weren't listed here. Frank? Today? Well, congratulations. Now we'll make sure it gets on this list next time. All right. Any others? That's quite a few. That's 6. Very good. Okay, so let's see the words. Ready? Happy birthday to you. There's no one like you. Uniquely created. I love knowing